Welcome to the third and final presentation in Topic 6. In this presentation, we'll be looking at Australian education, aspirations and agendas, drawing heavily on the reading for this topic, the Melbourne Declaration. As we discovered in the last presentation, Australia's education system is complex due to the dual governance structure, a practice tradition formed during the colonisation of the continent and later the federation of the colonies into states. Adding to the complexity, take a moment to think about who and how many people are responsible for enacting the governance of education and care across the 6 states and 2 territories at a federal level. As you'd be aware, this work is overseen by a raft of education ministers, one for each state and territory and one federal minister, 9 in all. So how does the work get done when jurisdictions cross sectorial state and federal boundaries? In a previous topic, we heard about the existence of the Australian Education Council. As you can see from this image, it's part of COAG, the Coalition of Australian Governments. This council forms a forum for policy coordination, development of resources, and most importantly, consideration of collaborative aims and intentions of Australia's education systems across all sectors. The Education Council was formerly known as Maketia, and the CSEC Council. You'll see those in the readings as you travel through. The collective aspirations and associated policy agendas concerning the education and care of Australia's children and young people are articulated through a series of aspirational documents called declarations. The first, the 1989 Hobart Declaration, was followed soon after by the 1999 Adelaide Declaration and the 2008 Melbourne Declaration. The next declaration, a city yet to be named, is due to be released in 2019. The declarations are key national roadmaps for education, produced and endorsed by the relevant state political leaders across Australia. Despite the input of key policymakers, the declarations are just that, declarations. They are big picture policy statements that provide a broad overview of education in Australia and serve as a statement of unified intent. As broad overviews, any material implementation of the policy intent in these declarations is dependent upon federal and state interpretation and contextualisation. However, they have served as a site for some significant national agreements. The first of the declarations, the Hobart Declaration, was written soon after the first national policy for schools in Australia, the National Policy for Education of Girls in Schools, written in 1987. The Hobart Declaration sets out 10 common and agreed national goals for schooling in Australia. As the first national document setting out these aims, the Hobart Declaration understandably makes explicit mention of schooling as a means of forming future citizens. Within its 10 aims, 2 relate explicitly to morality, values and citizenship, as you can read on the screen there. One was to develop students a capacity to exercise judgment in matters of morality, ethics and social justice, and the second to develop knowledge, skills, attitudes and values which will enable students to participate as active and informed citizens in our democratic Australian society within an international context. These declarations have led to many significant national agreements, such as, out of the Hobart Declaration, the agreement of the 8 key learning areas that we see running through Australia's curriculum. They may have slightly different names, but the agreed key learning areas are the same. The Adelaide Declaration was written 10 years later, during a time of Conservative federal government and a majority of Labor state and territory governments. The Adelaide Declaration opens with a statement that Australia's future depends on each citizen having the necessary knowledge, understanding, skills and values for a productive and rewarding life in an educated, just and open society. The text continues with many references to morals, values, social cohesion and citizenship, as you can read on this slide. The Melbourne Declaration released in 2008, continues to be explicit in its reference to schooling, developing the role of schooling in developing social cohesion, including producing active and informed citizens. That these citizens will act with moral and ethical integrity, and that they're committed to the national values of democracy, equity and justice, and participate in Australia's civic life. The Melbourne Declaration, in contrast to the Hobart and Adelaide declarations, does include commitments to action, which was a shift to a more systematic and material support for producing outcomes in line with these policies. There are several themes identified across all three of these national declarations. These are children as active and informed citizens in the future and contributing to society, schools as sites of social justice, Aboriginal cultures and histories, and defining the curriculum areas. These themes are integrated and are concerned with pointing out the importance of schooling to national cohesion and to building a moral, ethical and informed citizenship. The national declarations are orientated towards the construction of an abstract future adult citizen worker. These key national texts make no mention of children's present lives, their right to participate in matters that affect them, or the potential for a broad and active doing of citizenship in daily educational contexts. We'll talk more about that in topics 7 and 8. Let's look a little more closely at the Melbourne Declaration as an aspirational statement and see if we can identify some agendas arising from these that have been or are in the process of being addressed. The Melbourne Declaration articulates 2 goals. You can see them on the screen. These goals are then explained in more detail and aligned to key action areas. Many of these commitments to actions have been realised in the past decade. So, developing stronger partnerships, we have the Family School Partnerships Framework that's been developed. These supporting quality teaching and school leadership, there's a response there with the establishment of AITSL and the Australia's Professional Standards for Teachers. Strengthening early childhood education has been a clear winner and outcome of the Melbourne Declaration, with the formation of the Early Years Learning Framework and ASIQA as a federal governing or regulation body. Promoting world-class curriculum can be seen through the establishment of the formation of the Australian curriculum and of other government bodies such as ACARA. Perhaps the least shift or the least improvement in terms of these aspirational goals has been the improvement of educational outcomes for Indigenous youth and disadvantaged young Australians. Every year in the Closing the Gap reports we read about some small improvements, but nothing of a significant scale, despite significant investment and attention. Okay. So let's look at the commitment to promoting world-class curriculum assessment, specifically in relation to the broader goal of forming future citizens, Goal 2 of the Melbourne Declaration. General capabilities, a key dimension of the Australian curriculum and the Early Years Learning Framework, are addressed explicitly in the content of the learning areas. They play a significant role in realising the goals set down in the Melbourne Declaration, that all young people in Australia should be supported to become successful learners, confident and creative individuals, and active, informed citizens. The Melbourne Declaration identifies essential skills for 21st century learners, such as literacy, numeracy, ICT, thinking, creativity, teamwork and communication. It describes individuals who can manage their own well-being, relate well to others, make informed decisions about their lives, become citizens who behave with ethical integrity, relate to and communicate across cultures, work for the common good and act with responsibility at local, regional and global levels. Aspirational statements indeed. General capabilities in the Australian curriculum encompass the knowledge, skills, behaviours and dispositions that together with the curriculum content in each learning area and cross-curriculum priorities will assist students to live and work successfully in the 21st century. They complement the key learning areas of the early years learning framework, that children will have a strong sense of identity and well-being and are connected with and contribute to their world, and that they're confident, involved learners in and effective communicators. So from the Melbourne Declaration, we have this articulation within the Australian curriculum and in the outcomes of the early learning framework of these general capabilities. These capabilities are also reflected in the curriculum design in higher education. Here at SCU, you're studying what we call a foundation year. As you can see from this image, we've embedded the general capabilities into this foundation year within and across the specific units you'll be studying. In this unit, Foundations for Education, you're addressing a number of the capabilities, such as ethical understandings, critical thinking, intellectual understanding, literacy, ICT capability, and personal and social capability. Although the establishment of AITSL is explicitly linked to the commitment to action to support quality teaching and leadership, it has, through the registration and accreditation portfolio, strengthened accountability and transparency too, and it's activated or raised the profile of the professionalisation agenda. This agenda is particularly interesting when you consider it in light of the historical evolution of teaching through the history of Australia. Its teachers have been entrepreneurs, philanthropists, public servants, and now claiming as professionals. And from Bernstein and others' perspectives of the narrowing or standardisation of education as a source of tension. A topic too big to start talking about here, but one to certainly think more about. The question, is teaching a profession? And to answer that question, is teaching a profession? What are your thoughts on that question? Be sure to watch the perspectives from the field video at the end of this topic to hear what Nadine, Lynette and Travis have to say about that question. In the next topic, topic 7, Professor Anne Graham will be presenting on the topic wellbeing and relationships. And so we continue our theme of being an educator and looking particularly at that concept or that capability of ethical understanding.